Welcome to State of Ed, a podcast about education inside the classroom and out. My name is Marc Isseks.
And I'm Karen Walsh.
You absolutely are Karen Walsh, and you are not Nick Simone. For those of you who listen to this podcast regularly, we are super blessed to have Karen with us. Karen is a colleague of mine. I know Karen for 15 or 20 years, if not longer.
Mm.
She is an English teacher in the school where I am an assistant principal. And when Nick told me he had a conflict this evening, Karen was my absolute first go-to because of our guest, who is just a perfect match for Karen and all of her talents. So let me tell you a little bit about our guest, and then Karen, you'll kind of tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll get this conversation up and running. And it's going to be a messy one because there are a lot of creative people on this conversation, and a lot of thoughts and rumination and things that we're working on and processing. So it's definitely going to be a messy but really awesome and fun conversation. I'm looking forward to it. And our guest is Dan Thomas, who is a former STEM teacher from Jamestown, New York, just a little bit south of Buffalo, a fellow New Yorker. And he is a recently retired teacher who spent his entire career at the same school he graduated from, which is absolutely incredible. And I know that Karen can definitely speak to consistency and longevity as well. Dan is passionate about STEM, PBL, and play in the classroom, especially when it comes to good old-fashioned Legos. And I definitely want to talk a lot about that as well. I had the great fortune of meeting Dan at the FETC conference in Orlando, which is just shout out to FETC and Jen Womble. They do a fantastic job. And if you're an educator looking to make incredible connections, you must get yourself to FETC. And once I got into this conversation with Dan and saw his love for student engagement, I knew that he would be an absolute great guest for this podcast. So Dan, welcome to State of Ed.
Wow, I'm trying to figure out who this guy is you're talking about there, Mark. You know, yeah,
It's
great.
you.
Yeah, just a simple guy from Western New York, doing what I do.
I've been to Western New York. There are no simple people. They're very complex humans out there
You
who
know,
are
we
very capable of handling a ridiculous quantity of snow, by the way.
a couple inches here or there, yeah, we get some.
Yeah, you're lake effect people, so you get a couple of feet at a time. So
Absolutely.
yeah, Dan, take us a little bit through your career in that one school, and then Karen is also spent a tremendous amount of time at our school as an English educator, and definitely want to hear about both your experiences before we kind of dive deeply into this conversation on tech and play and engagement.
Oh, well, I started teaching in 93. Like I was literally I graduated college in December of 92. In February 1st of 1993, I started teaching. And my first day was a snow day, by the way. And I set off the alarm. So my first day was a snow day. And I walked back into my old school 4.5 years later from when I graduated. And 32 years later, I was still there. Yeah, I loved what I did. I had a great, I'm speaking to you, Mark, as a principal. I had great administration, um, very supportive, very allowed to do really kind of what we felt was right for the kids. They let us be professionals. And I found that that's not quite always the case everywhere else, but I got to teach kids and I got to have fun with kids and this September was the first September since I was 5 that I didn't go to school. So, 50 years of going to school, and it was a little weird. So now I just try to get some words out there that, we're teachers. Let's teach. Let's be people. Let's be humans. Let's make connections and do that type of stuff. So yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Karen, that has to resonate with you, doesn't it?
1,000%. I too started in 1993. I graduated in May of 93, and then I started in September of 93. And I taught at the school in the same town that I live in and I still live in. So very, very similar with you, Dan. Yeah, in the same zip code. I didn't actually go to that school, but there was a junior high that fed into the school that I teach in now, and which is now the current Elmont Memorial Library. I didn't know if you knew that, Mark. So that was my junior high school, and it there's a big sense of pride to work in the town that you live, and see, some people, running into kids at Home Depot, or running into families, and it's just a really special, um, a special thing.
Oh, I got so
Yeah.
many stories about stuff like that too between me and my daughter. It's the running
Yeah.
joke in our family about that.
And it's funny too, also, like, I've been teaching for 32 years. And one of the things that I always tell the kids, I tell them, I said, guys, I've been in this classroom longer than any home I've ever lived in. And they look at me, they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, now
Wow.
you wonder why I want to keep it so neat.
There you go.
It's probably not even true. It's just a ploy to keep a neat classroom, which is
It
Karen's.
is
She's
actually
she's
is
playing
true.
chess, Dan. Yeah, she's not playing
I
checkers.
play the long game, Mark. I play the long game.
Well done. Well done. Right before we started recording, Dan and I were just like on the verge of just letting all of our feelings out about AI, but I like really promised like please let's save it for the conversation once we start recording. So here we are, we're recording. Dan, let's just fire out and talk about it because it's the biggest topic right now in education. What are your thoughts and musings about AI and where we are and where we're going?
Oh, well, you know, I think AI's kind of reached that point where I'm sorry if you hear my dogs. My wife just got home. Um, two beagles, you can never
They're excited
be
to
too
see
Oh.
her.
quiet. Um, but I think we're at a point now where AI is saturated, right? And it's only 2 or 3 years old at this point. But I think that we're at the point where teachers are beyond the teachers that at least I talk to are beyond yeah, what can it do for me? Hey, this is cool, and into, well, how can I use it? How can I make it? How can I use it so it makes my job better with the kids? So I think we're getting kind of into that implementation stage and away from the ooh, look, new shiny stage. And that's a big step, and that's kind of a mind shift thing too for teachers to do when we're getting there, because it's not going away. And it's very similar if you look at kind of the arc that AI has been taken. If you go back to when Google hit the schools and when the internet came into schools and when the math teachers started using calculators and YouTube, it's the same arguments. Well, the kids are going to cheat. Well, you know what? The kids are going to cheat. Sorry, man. Kids are going to cheat. And if you give them an assignment that they can throw into Chat GPT and get the answers, then I'm sorry, that assignment's not very good. If you're just asking regurgitation stuff, sorry, that's not what it's about anymore. And so, yeah, I mean, that's where it's going. It's going to make learning deeper and more applicable, I think, is the arc it's going in.
Kara, what do you think about that? Because what's special about you and Dan, from my perspective, is your willingness, not even just willingness, like your absolute like hell bent desire to continue to innovate throughout your entire career and not just like plateau early and just kind of ride it out, but really just continually finding new challenges to tackle, new things to learn, new things to employ, taking those risks, having some flops, iterating, making them better, but still the willingness to do that well into your career where the average teacher perhaps does not have that same willingness. So, and I know that you've experimented tremendously with AI already in just, like Dan said, just the last couple of years where it's really come onto the scene. So what's your reflection in terms of what Dan just said?
Two things I want to say: that I love that he talked about we're past the shiny, oh, look what we could do stage into implementation. I think that is such a wonderful way of putting it. And you said something earlier, Dan, also, and I'm fortunate now in my career to be working with wonderful leaders who are open to trial and error, and trying new things, and ooh, that did not work very well, or and
Right.
it's nice to have that support. So I'm grateful to you, Mark, and to
Oh,
the
thank you.
administrative team for that, and I think that's really important. um so what was the question?
Your thoughts about Dan's perspective about
Yeah.
AI and
Yeah.
kind of like where we are and the creation of assignments or the recreation of assignments and the necessity to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah, it definitely you do have to spend, your time, figuring out like, okay, well, what's the skill that I want them to learn, and use the AI as a tool for them to learn that skill. Kids are still going to need to write a sentence, so Dan, sorry that I'm talking specifically about English, but students still need to write a sentence, but there's a way that you can make sure that they create a correct prompt, for using AI. There's still so much that you can do, and it is a shift, and it's exciting shift. I like experimenting with it. Mm.
I mean, Karen, and not to brag in front of her, but like she literally changed her entire teaching philosophy and methodology just a few years ago because she saw
I was gonna bring
something.
that. I was gonna bring that
Oh
up,
yeah, go
Mark, and
ahead.
I
No,
wasn't
don't, yeah,
sure if
don't
you
let,
want me to
yeah,
go. Yeah.
please,
So
absolutely.
I went to Niagara University, by the way, Dan. So I'm very
Nice.
familiar with
Purple
Western New York.
Eagles.
We're yeah, we're above the snow belt, so we didn't get as much snow as you guys. But I do have a minor in computer science, so I've always been like a computer, like I like that
Mhm.
area of study. But I also happen to have a passion for English. Fast forward, I also have my master's in library science, library and information science. So again, there's that connection
Yeah.
of the information sciences and kind of like marrying the two. So I've always been into learning new methodologies, and as Mark pointed out, I came across the MOOCs, the massive open online courses, and I happened to put upon the Modern Classroom project.
Mhm.
I was doing a flipped classroom with, I think at the time we had Schoology before COVID hit. The kids, when we had to go remote, my kids were already like good to go. We're like, all right, this is great. So I've always been really open to trying new things and try. I hate to say it because I'm really not a trendy person, but being on trend as far as tech is concerned.
And Mark, you said one thing in there that I kind of want to point out too, which is huge. And I think this needs to go to the kids as well. You said that Karen tries things out, iterates, fails, and tries again. That's what we need in education, right? That's the if you do nothing else besides trying to get your kids to fail, and I think that's a huge mind shift, right? I didn't want to gloss over that, but that's huge, that iteration piece, because that's where I lived for 32 years. And I'm sure Karen did
And
too with
yeah.
writing an essay or a poem or whatever.
Mm.
You write multiple drafts. It's not one and
And I
done.
and I love sharing with them too, just like even lesson planning. That's
Yeah.
my writing that I have to do, and how
Mhm.
I write a lesson plan, and it worked great for period two, but then I tried it with period three, not so much, and again
Right.
having to adjust and adapt.
Exactly. Because that's what real work is like. That's what the kids are
Mm.
going to see when they leave when they leave our classroom.
I don't know if you're familiar with Thomas Friedman, but I'm an avid reader of Thomas Friedman's work, and I'm probably going back. It's got to be 15 years ago. He wrote a column in the Times that said, well, there were a few columns in a series, but one was that average is over,
Mhm.
and the other was always be in beta, which is just such a great
Yeah.
phrase, right? You're just always
Yeah.
in beta. You're never just publishing, hitting publish on your whatever it is, idea, website, business, assignment, and you're done. You're never done because there's always something that is going to be in need of an update or a refresh. That's the world that we live in now. We used
And
to,
it
yeah, we used to have a product, right? The company would make the product and that would be it. And I mean, Dell blew that up 30 years ago, right? The computer company like Gateway would make a computer and say, well, this is the computer. And now you could either buy it or not buy it. And Dell said, what if you like choose how you want your computer to be? And we'll just, make it for you and then ship it to you. And that from that moment on, it really just changed. Like everything is always in a state of adaptation and flexibility is a key component to that.
And that's why I
and I
struggle
I
with
would
the canned curriculum in
Talk
the
a little bit
school.
about that, Dan.
Because like Karen said, right? Her first period class was totally different than her third period class, right? In teaching middle school, Monday's going to be first period, then Tuesday first period. You're going to get two different little Johnnies walking in the door. Um, Hopefully they've showered, but that's a different story. But that's
Never
what
a
that
guarantee. Yeah.
no, never. But if you're buying these programs and your school's buying these scripted say this and at this point, and you got to do this and do this way. And I think when some of the New York State stuff came out years ago in the new math and the Common Cores, that's kind of what they did and said, you have to do it this way. Well, you know what? That might work for a kid in Brooklyn, right? And that might work for a kid at Southwestern for me, but the kid at Jamestown down the road or the kid in Panama, that we share, that's not going to work for, right? And I think that's where I think AI come in first circle here. Look at this. Look at me go.
Well
Um,
done.
that's where the AI piece comes in is like you can take that scripted curriculum because it's probably pretty good, right? It's addressing the standards, but now you can throw that lesson plan into Chat GPT or School AI or whatever your AI tool of choice is and say, how do I make that relevant for my seventh graders at Southwestern? We just had a snowstorm or we just had, it's coming to spring. How do I make math come alive? How do I make the outsiders relevant to my seventh graders in an ELA class? And what's a project I could do with them, right? This is what I've been doing because Karen, you've been doing some awesome things for 30 years and you've probably got your go-to lesson plans. But with AI, now you can say, what can I do to make this better? Punch some holes in this. What are some things that you can see that might be an issue? What are things that are great? What are things that are an issue? How can I tweak those? What are some things that I can prepare? And on top of that, now you have time to actually talk to the kids. And that is where the rubber meets the road. If you have time to talk to the kids as kids, and then you can use your tools in your toolbox and your teaching skills
And
to
I
make that
enjoy I
connection.
enjoy making them part of the process, with the kids. I'm
Exactly.
like, and trying something new. So, hey guys, I'm trying this. I've never done it before. I don't know how it's gonna go. I need your honest feedback. Like, what can we do? I teach eighth grade this year. I taught 11th and 12th grade for about 28 years. And and I was it's easier to be open with the senior high kids, but with the eighth graders, like I was a little reluctant to do that. But when I started doing it with them too, they appreciate it,
You have to
making them
learn
part of
though.
the process. Exactly,
You have to
exactly.
teach them. They're,
Yeah. And as far as talking about the AI, it's so funny that you mentioned The Outsiders because we're actually reading The Outsiders right now, and we're doing literature circles. But it's so funny because, like, I was just thinking today. I said, "Oh, you know what? I think next year, if I teach this again, I'm gonna." And I'm like, "Oh, wait." I'm not going to be here next year, but it's that
You have to rub it
adaptation,
in,
and,
don't you,
and
Karen?
I
You
know,
had
I
to
know.
rub
I'm
it
like,
in.
but I'll share it with Miss Papaccio. I'll share it with her, and she can do
That's
it
what
with
she
her
wants.
kids. But it is exciting, and it is great to have that tool to say, okay, this is what I have. How can I make it better? And like you said, like put into the prompt that I teach eighth grade in New York State, and
right.
this is a skill that I want them to learn. And I even go so far as saying that I'm a 55-year-old,
Oh,
white
exactly.
woman named Karen, and we talk about stereotypes, and
And you
this,
want to talk
and
to the
so
manager and
right, exactly, exactly.
Karen doesn't need ChatGPT's help with that one. She's got that all. I'm just kidding.
Under lock and key.
Exactly. But Dad, to go back to what you said, I really think there's like a wonderful opportunity here just to kind of leverage on what you were saying. For years and years, there's been this mythology around differentiation. This is my opinion. I feel like it's always sounded great, but it's never really worked effectively because the ranges of abilities in a typical public school classroom, I can only speak to public school, 31 plus years in a public school education system, but the ranges of abilities are too vast and the
Mhm.
teacher preparation time is too limited. So despite your intentions, you can't properly, by definition, differentiate for all of those. When I first started, I had 37 students in my class in Brooklyn. I mean, how for one in one period, you can't. So you can try to come close. You could try to like throw them into like like batches, like small, medium, large. Like
Right.
good, medium, and like struggling. But now all of a sudden, with agentic AI, there's this real opportunity to bring to bear what the philosophy was intended to produce of differentiation, because you can literally have you could create a GPT, create a gem. You
Mhm.
can create these tools, these agents, to literally meet every student specifically where they are and help bring them up to whatever the baseline is that you need them to be at in order to get into your next unit, your next topic, etc. And that to me is like super exciting because for the first time, the teacher has more power than they've ever had.
Yeah.
And if we fight that and we just try to take out the blue books that we wrote our essays in college and just say we're not using AI at all, then we're losing all of the good stuff. And I know there's bad stuff. I know there are plenty of valid arguments about AI's downside, about there's the ethical side of AI and the the legal side of AI. I understand all of that and it's valid and it will run its course, that conversation. But in the moment right now, the teacher has the ability to be more powerful and more effective than they've ever been if
And Mark,
leveraged correctly.
just to add to that, like you talk about the power, but it's not consuming as much time. And that's
Right.
the beauty of
Yes.
it. Like that's the beauty of it. Like it is
It's not
so much more power and it's not taking up the time.
and it's not another thing that you're adding to a teacher's plate.
Right.
It's not another initiative. It's not another program. It's not another SEL thing. It can be, right? It can be used for that, but that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. But you're talking about things like, and I stole this one from a deal from Magic School because we were a Magic School when I left. And he created this custom prompt inside of one of his things and he called it spicy, medium, and mild. Right?
Mm,
So you could take that lesson plan that you're doing with the outsiders, and I had a button that said spicy, medium, mild, and what that did was in the background it said, okay, let's make this. Give me a version that's for a kid that's above grade level. So there's your spicy. Give me one for a kid that's on grade level. There's your medium, and give me one for a kid that's below grade level. And there's your mild. So now you're getting three versions of it, and you could print out the document, the questions, right? So Mark might get two questions where Karen might get, you know, seven that require some more thought. But you can do that in a second, in
mhm.
5 seconds. Now, obviously, there's still some teacher input that has to be in there. You still have to edit it. You still have the critical thinking. And speaking of critical thinking, I think AI is going to improve critical thinking if it's used in the effective way that it needs to be used. But that's something we can get to. But on the teacher side of it, right, you can create these documents, these questions, these scenarios that you want in during lunch, between blocks, between periods, you could do it, right? I mean,
Mhm.
and still have something that's pretty effective. Now, is it gonna stink the first time? Absolutely. You know, sometimes I still fall down when I walk, right? I mean, right? I play golf and sometimes the ball goes way to the right, like I hit one in the road today. Good thing there wasn't anybody driving by.
Yet
Um,
another soft retiree flex. I get it. I get it.
well, the snow finally melted.
Mm.
Oh, I could read Karen's mind. She's absolutely stealing that idea, maybe as early as tomorrow, potentially. It's
Oh,
it's possible.
again, that's part of what I'm trying to do too, Mark, is like when I talk about things and I do things and I tell people stuff, it's like, and I've started to call it the Tuesday test. Can I use it Tuesday morning?
Yeah.
So you're going to class Monday and stuff like that. And can I, and I got to change. I got to adapt. Can I use this without a high lift, low floor, high ceiling? Can I use it tomorrow? So I started calling it like the Tuesday test, right? Because I want something that it doesn't do any good to get to learn these tools if I can't use it by myself tomorrow. Otherwise, if Mark has to come in and sit and hold my hand, Mark's busy. Karen's busy. Your IT people, yeah, you're just, watching ESPN and filling out discipline forms,
Pretty much.
putting kids in ISS. But no, but I mean, like, if you can't use it tomorrow, then what's the point?
And to go back to what you're saying about like the shiny new things, like especially, during COVID, there was such overwhelm because there were so many shiny new things. And it took me a minute to say, okay, these are all great, but I can only really use one or two of these because I'm overwhelmed. And that's great. And what I love about today's technology and specifically the AI component is that it's also very intuitive and you do and the learning curve I don't find it like I don't as laborious as it was, like, during COVID, learning all this new technology. I
Yeah.
find it's a lot more intuitive.
You just gotta talk, right? You can
Yeah.
and what's sad is it's the worst it's ever gonna be, and it's pretty darn good, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And you just gotta be willing to try some things and ask questions. It's not like a, "Hey, push button, get bacon" type of thing, you know? It's there's some back and forth.
I kinda
I'm
like that
just I'm
idea, though.
I think you're onto something
I'm
there.
just thinking of the push the hair dryers or the
Yeah.
hand dryers where it looks like, it says push button, get bacon.
Yeah.
Still haven't had bacon to come out of those, but, um
Keep pushing though. You one day.
oh, I keep pushing, Mark, in more ways than one.
We could dream.
It's you sidetracked me with the bacon. I apologize.
I
Sorry,
know.
man.
I lost my entire train of thought. It
The
just took
candy of
one
meat.
Sorry,
reference.
Mark.
It
So
just took one reference to bacon. I was gone. Dan, you spent so much time in the STEM world, right? You were that was your focus for many many years. Isn't this really like taking those concepts and those ideals to just like all new extremes? And that to me was where I know what I was going to say, kind of connect that to what you had said earlier, which is the scripted curriculum. And I know some folks who are super creative and amazing educators down in like Georgia and that
Mhm.
part of the country, and they've moved to this scripted curriculum and they're absolutely dying in the classroom because they want to be themselves, because what they offer is spectacular to kids and they're being shackled. And then AI has the ability to kind of like unshackle everybody and let them fulfill their full innovative and creative potential. And I just feel like it's the complete wrong direction to be going at this particular time. And so that's kind of like one thought. And the other thought is like how this is in some ways like a continuation and like on a nuclear level of what you've been preaching and doing on with STEM for, the large part of your career.
A lot of this I'm glad you brought that up because a lot of the stuff that I did in my classroom, I took for granted, right? Because that's what I did growing up. Um, that's what I solved problems. We did projects, it didn't work. We had conversations. Things spectacularly, epically failed, and we celebrated those. Whereas if a kid epically fails, maybe, and I'm gonna pick on ELA a little bit, Karen, sorry. Um,
it's all
but,
good.
um, if a kid writes an essay and you take it home back in, the typical, you take it home over the weekend, you grade it, you mark it up, and you give them some awesome feedback. But 2 or 3 days later, that kid gets that feedback. It doesn't mean anything to him. He just looks at or she just looks at the number in the corner, throws it in the trash can on the way out the door. Done, done. I got an 85. Okay, I'm happy with that. My mom's not going to be mad at me. Right. But what did they learn? And I think AI gives that feedback piece. And I think that's where I lived, right? We're looking at something, we're building a bridge, and I'm walking over and I'm going, well, why are you doing this? So there's the piece I think that the scripted curriculum and the sage on the stage doesn't get is that how can I want to know what the kid's thinking. I don't care what the kid knows. He doesn't have to regurgitate it on a test to me because they may never build a bridge again. And no offense, Karen, I've never written a limerick again. I haven't written a poem in years. Now I could get some pretty good limericks, but right, because we're getting into that season now where you're going to see the things on Facebook to go back to the Pythagorean theorem. I'm real glad I used learned the Pythagorean theorem in math class when it's time to do my taxes. And I'm like, well, you know what? My reply to that post is I use the Pythagorean theorem a lot of times during the day because I'm out back building a deck off the back of my house and I didn't have a framing square big enough. So I need that 3, 4, 5 right triangle to figure out if my deck's going to be square off my house or if it's going to be crooked as heck and my wife's going to yell at me. And it all depends on what you're going to do. You got to have those conversations. You got to give that feedback and you got to have that iteration. And I don't know if I'm answering the question or not because I think I went down a rabbit hole here, but you know, that's where that project piece comes in, and that's where some just talking to the kids, and I want to see them. I want to see how they're thinking because with AI and with Google and with the internet and everybody having a cell phone and a device, information isn't the premium it used to be. Knowledge is. How are the kids going to learn it? They're going to use it, right? Great example. This is an example I use a lot. I had a kid in one of my last classes that Smart kid wouldn't do area and volume in math class, didn't find it interesting. All he wants to do is pour concrete with his father, right? He wants to pour driveways and sidewalks. I can guarantee that kid 10 years, 4 years, 3 years when he's out of high school will show up at the end at your house, stand at the end of your driveway, go, yeah, it's 16 by 40. That's X number of cubic yards. That's going to be $200 a cubic yard for concrete plus a $50 an hour for labor. Oh, it's going to be $6,000. Well, why can that kid do that now? Because it means something. And I think going big full circle here, AI allows that to happen. Well, AI allows that piece, the outsider piece, to how does that relate to a kid in, I don't even know where you live, Karen. I'm sorry. Um, how does that relate to a kid in Jamestown? Because
Yeah.
we don't have street gangs in Jamestown. I'm sorry. We have
Mhm.
Amish.
Mhm. Yeah.
Sorry. I probably think I went down a couple rabbit holes there.
I love a good rabbit hole. And I think it's fun for the kids to go down those rabbit holes too, you
Yeah.
know? Like
You
having
gotta,
fun with that and,
you gotta
like, giving that
show
time to
how they're
play.
thinking, right? You
Yeah.
gotta see how they're thinking because
Mhm.
that's what's going to serve them well when they leave our classroom.
Yeah, and that's the exciting part too, Mark, that you've been sharing with us in our team meetings about like the gem and like, well, how can I use something like that to provide feedback in a paragraph and have them maybe write a paper copy of a paragraph like this is the prompt, this is the whatever, and then incorporate that AI piece and how to make it better and then see if they could emulate that in their own writing. I mean, being a good writer is by copying other good writers.
It's
Right.
iteration. It's no
Yeah.
different than the engineering class or your computer science class or your shop class. Or here's an interesting thought. Your football team, your band director, right? Art, right? You want to see iteration, you want to see visible thinking, go visit those people. Don't go to an
Mhm.
ELA
Right.
convention. Don't go to an ELA session. Go walk down the hall and go to basketball practice and see your coach doing fundamentals, right? Every day.
Mhm.
See him talking to the kids, see them physically doing something, get them out of their rows. And so
Right.
you go visit. What's it going to take? 20 minutes?
You're talking about process over product, really. That's
Yeah,
that's the key,
exactly. And that's
right?
where
You're a PBL guy, you're a STEM guy. Like
yeah,
it's all about the process over the product. Like you try it, if it works, what did you learn from it, and how do you make it better? If it didn't work, what did you learn from it? How can you make it better? Like everything is always working towards improvement. We're all works in progress. So, um, but it's the model of education for a very long time was not that. The model of education was, I'm going to teach you something. You're going to regurgitate it back. If you get it correct, you will receive a certain mark and then it'll be done and you'll never have to do that again. That is the antithesis of what we're talking about.
yeah.
Now, along the
It's
way, people learn how to think as a byproduct of that. But the problem is now that, like you said,
they
the information is literally at everyone's fingertips. I tell a story to anybody who's still listening to me at this point in my career, which is not many people. My dad was an AP in Brooklyn, and when I was in elementary school, we would have the ritual of getting our textbooks, and then we'd have the ritual of covering the textbooks. And my family being blue collar, we're not getting bougie, store bought, fancy book covers. It was Wallbaum's brown paper bag
uh-huh.
with the stain from the thing that leaked. Like you're taking it. That's all we have, and that's what you're using. So that was all part of the process. But the other part that I was very fortunate is my dad would write down the publisher and the book title, whatever it was. Then he'd go back to his elementary school, check the book closet, which fewer and fewer schools even have them anymore. And he would find the teacher's edition if they had it, and he would bring me a copy of the teacher's edition. And I felt like Thanos with like all the Infinity Stones because because having the answers was the most important thing. It was
Yeah.
the holy grail. And I had all the answers. I knew what the teacher was going to ask because all the questions were on the margin that the kids couldn't see. And I knew the answers to all the questions because the teacher's edition gave suggested answers or responses. So I had like this sense of power, way too much for an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old at the time. But now every 8-year-old and every 10-year-old and every 12-year-old has that times infinity. And so now the game has shifted because I don't have to show up as a student to the class to find out from Miss Walsh, my English teacher, who Ponyboy was, or what the central conflict was, or what the theme is, or because I could literally find that out if I want to on my own at any time on the couch, on the toilet. It doesn't make a difference. I don't have to take a bus, get up early, wait in the cold, deal with that knucklehead who's always sitting 2 rows behind me and throwing things at the back of my head. Right? I don't have to deal with any of those things, and I can
Mhm.
still get the information. So like, we have to make school attractive to the students in today's setting, knowing all of these things and understanding all these things. And I think, like you and Karen, that I'm very optimistic. Like, this is a wonderful opportunity to go into to areas and territory that we've never gone into. That's more powerful than anything that we've ever done in the past. If we're led that way, if we are open and optimistic and collaborative in that way. But if we're still trying to like play school from 20th century,
Play
then we're going to have a
school.
real day of reckoning, because it's those are two paths that are not aligned whatsoever.
Well, let me ask you this question, and I'd like your feedback on this. Why do kids come to school? Seems a simple question. That's it. Why do you think, Karen, you can chime in too.
Compulsory education law.
Well, there's that.
I think there's a social aspect, of course, like they need to be around each other
Yeah.
and
Kids don't come
learn
to
from
school to
each
watch
other.
us work. And you could stay up late Sunday night making that awesome lesson plan for Monday morning. Kids don't care. They don't come to see us work, right? I learned this from my daughter's swim coach. Like, my daughter was a swimmer for many years, spent too many hours at the pool. And, that's a sport that is tough, right? You put your face in the water, you stare at the line at the bottom of the pool for 2 hours and you can't breathe. And it's the only sport you get yelled at for breathing too much. Um, but he's like, why do kids don't come to swim practice because they love it? They might like it a lot, but they don't come. They come because it's where their friends are. It's social. It's not, their whole goal isn't to get smarter. It's sometimes it might be to see what we can get. Can we get under Miss Walsh's skin today? Or what can I
I
The
get
always tell
answer
them
her?
is
that.
no.
I always tell them that their job is like to test their boundary, test boundaries, and that's your job.
Exactly.
Like that's yeah.
The only
It's
thing
our job
I'll
to
push
push
back
back.
slightly on what you said.
Exactly.
I'm going to push just gently back a little bit on what you said, Dan. Only to the extent that, like, I do believe firmly that that lesson plan, or that whatever it is that you're crafting for the students,
Yeah.
you can, as that great educator, create the conditions where
Hmm.
students learn to care about those things that you care about, and you can create that environment and support that environment. It's a very delicate dance that you have to do, and you have to like keep that flame going and introduce it and fan it the right way and feed it the right way. And someone like you, someone like Karen, I know you've made a lifetime of doing just this. So students, while they maybe originally came for A, are now returning for B and C and D. So I
Yeah.
don't want to, because otherwise I don't want to take away the enormous power that I truly believe that educators do have and do wield, because
Oh yeah.
educators change the lives and the trajectories of everybody, sometimes negatively, hopefully most of the time positively. And the reason that that is because you take the most successful people in the world. Like, I used the example of like Adele. She was doing her residency in Vegas, and she's used to performing in front of millions of people and making millions of dollars and everything else. And everything, she's pretty seems to be pretty cool with it. But then she's in the middle of performing and she sees one of her teachers. I don't know if you saw this video
I did.
Mhm.
online,
Yeah.
and like, she completely, everything stops, the show stops, the singing stops, and she just starts crying and hugging this person. And so to me, the ability of an amazing teacher to have that kind of connection and change the lives of a person, that's
Yeah.
we're doing the jobs that we're doing because somebody influenced us in some incredibly profound way, or maybe multiple people in all likelihood. So, and some of that comes through, that love comes through the lesson plan. Some of it comes through just the way you say hello. Some of it comes through the high five. Some of it comes from the hug. Some of it, but it's all of it in its totality.
It, yes, because we've all had that student going back to Karen back at the grocery store, the Home Depot with the kids in the community, right? Um, that's the best part. I was out for dinner the other night. One of my former students walks up and starts talking to me. That's what it's about. Because if you think back to what do you remember from school? You don't remember the worksheet. You don't remember the essay that you wrote. You don't
Right.
remember the math problems. You remember the time the physics teacher blew up the physics lab, right? You remember the
Right.
time that Mark let the goats go in the school for the senior prank, or the year the seniors wrote seniors on our and spelled seniors wrong in the graffiti wall. It was hilarious in 6-foot letters. Um, so that's but that and you do it for that stuff, and you can see the kids, and you make that connection with the kids,
It's
and then the
interesting that
engagement comes along.
It's interesting that you bring that. I lost my dad last June, and he was an educator as well in the same district and in the same community. And when he passed, I put something on, social media, and former students that are older than I am,
Right.
came out of the woodwork and were just talking about like, oh, Mr. Walsh, like, he's the reason I'm never late for anything,
Mhm.
and he shared a story, and I shared that story in his eulogy, and it's the consistency and that connection. Yeah.
And sometimes you
My
don't see that, right? Unfortunately, we don't
Of
see
course.
that for years. You don't
Mm.
see that
Hmm.
one little
Oh.
simple one day you made a comment to a kid, "Hey, your haircut looks nice," or you just talk to them because that's what you do. But you don't realize that until 10, 15, 20 years down the road, what an impact that you have. I walked out the door and the art teacher had the kids take a picture and draw artwork of me with my sayings on them. So I got this awesome artifact from my 7th and 8th grade classes, my last ones. And you don't think that you make that impact on them. And I'm never gonna, that's gonna go sit front and center over any other award, whatever, because it
Came
means
from your
that's your
kids.
body of work, right? And I don't want
Mm.
to get too philosophical and touchy feely on any of this stuff, but that's where you know that art of teaching, that the scripted piece, that's where that being a person comes first, right? That's where being making that connection with the kids and being able to be a little fun with them and have because they're at the end of the day they're I don't care if they're 6, 12, or 18 or 55. We're still kids. We're all somebody's kids. And it's sometimes we spend so much time with them that we forget they're kids and we forget
Mm.
that they're learning and we forget that they are going to make mistakes and that's okay
What
because
I
they
was
get
so
their own
excited
stressed
about for
out.
What I'm so excited about for the future is that I really feel that, we did have the dark ages of education, teaching to the test, and the slows, and all the, I don't
Mhm.
even know what all that, and just the numbers and the blah 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 blah. And I'm so excited for the younger generation of teachers, because I can attest to it at Swanica High School, that there's such an atmosphere of, again, just trying to learn new things, teach new ways, and embracing just, new technology, new methodology, and it's exciting. It's an exciting time, I think, for younger teachers.
And
And
if
I
you can
think one
get
of the
that.
keys to make that happen is people in the leadership ranks have to become very, very comfortable very quickly with saying things like, I don't know the answer to that,
Huge.
which is something that's really tough for some folks, really tough for some folks. But I was working with a chairperson just earlier today. We were talking about AI, and I'm trying to like make heads or tails of it, and we're talking about generative versus agentic, and trying to come up with a gem that can help maybe just open up doors and try to allow new thoughts to be had. And the chairperson asked me like, okay, so then what do I do next? What do I do with this? And I turned to her and said, I have no idea.
Whatever you want.
Honestly, this is the first time I'm even having this conversation with anybody because I just had this idea yesterday. I'm sharing it with you today. And by tomorrow, you will lap me with your knowledge on this very thing. My job is just to kind of like do my part to push people's thinking in the most supportive ways
Mm.
and then support them as they explore and do all those other things and not be hiding in a bush somewhere ready to pounce on them and then start writing negative evaluations. That's the
Hmm.
antithesis of what we need right now. So we need just
Hmm.
like kind of this openness and this willingness to say, you know what, I have no clue, but let's figure it out together. I think that's going to go a lot further than trying to pretend to know things that you can't possibly know.
Kind of sounds like what should happen in the classroom too, with the kids. Hmm.
Absolutely.
Let
Absolutely.
them fail. Like I tell my kids, somebody had to teach you how to eat. Somebody had to
Mhm.
teach you how to tie your shoe because and some of you still can't. But
That's what
you
Velcro
learn
is
by,
for. Yeah.
watch the dogs. If you got, I had two beagles. You heard them earlier. They learned how to play and how to fight a little bit. When they went too far, they knew it, right? And
Mhm.
things got a little heated. And
For
I'm
the
sure
Beagles or for you?
that too. I'm sure I'll push a few buttons with my wife later on that I'll learn not do that again.
Well, you're better than I am because I still haven't learned.
Oh, yeah, I still won't learn.
So Dan, let's wrap up the conversation because I feel like I could have this conversation literally all night, but I want to be respectful of your time and Karen's because we both have to get up to work tomorrow.
Yeah,
Even
I
though
gotta go
Dan
to the
does not,
pool.
he'll be playing golf again. Um, in this new chapter of your life, Dan, how are you leveraging all of your skills, your understanding of STEM, your understanding of PBL? I know that you have an involvement in Legos. You have a kind of like a passion for that. So can you just kind of share what excites you about this new chapter in your life as a post classroom educator, but always an educator until the end?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Well, I, g- I guess it's the realization that like some of the things that I did in my classroom for 30 years, not everybody's doing. And we build things like you talked about Lego. I'm even have my Lego bricks here that I've been playing with. They're on my desk all the time. That's just the tool I use. I choose Lego, and I don't want to necessarily be known as the Lego guy. It's just the medium I like to use. It could be craft sticks, it could be popsicle sticks, it could be a whiteboard, whatever. Anyways, but I use that because if you use your hands and you're doing something, then you're using a lot of skills and then you can have something to talk about. So if you're doing a Socratic circle. So what's my next step? I'm working on trying to figure out a way to get some of this stuff out to teachers, out to educators that are like we kind of talked about earlier, that are looking for something. They don't know necessarily what they're looking for, but they know what they don't want, and they don't want what they've always got. And I'd love to go into schools and work with teachers and stuff like that, but I want to be that guy that shows up on the staff development day, does his 2 hour shtick on the stage, and walks out of
With a
there
shiny new thing.
with with hey, we're going to play with Lego today, or let's talk about engagement, and these are some strategies, and here's 10 things you can do tomorrow, right? Here's 10 tips and tricks, all this stuff. I want to come in and I want to sit down with Karen in her classroom for an hour and say, how can we make this work for Karen? And I think we need to take that whole mindset too into the classroom. Like little Johnny comes in. How can I make this work for Johnny or Susie and Alex and whomever that's walking into my classroom on a daily basis? And just getting that word out there. And that's through, talking to people like you, going to the conferences like FETC. I'm in fact going to the Michigan conference here in a couple weeks in the end of March.
Cool.
And we got a couple regional ones here in New York State that I'm heading to over here on the western side. But just getting that out there and saying, these are some things that we can do that isn't another thing on your plate. It's not another initiative that the school has to buy. To me, it's common sense, which, you know, the old saying
Not
goes,
always so
common sense
common. Hmm.
isn't so common. Um, so just how can we make what the kids are doing applicable and visual, and how can we see and document what they're learning, not just the product at the end of it? I don't know if that answered the question or not.
It definitely did. Dan, where can people find you if they want to continue this conversation and seek you out for your expertise?
I found that LinkedIn is a great place right now for education. LinkedIn is phenomenal. I think that's where we connected like
Yep.
virtually in the first place. I'm there on LinkedIn. Dan Thomas. I think there's probably 6 million of us. Coach Thomas Tech is my username. That's my little LLC that I started, and I'm on delving into TikTok a little bit, adding some videos, Instagram, just something else that maybe you didn't know, Mark. But for about the past 5 or 6 years, I take a daily selfie and post a dad joke with it.
I didn't
Because
know that. That's
because
dangerous information for me to have. At least that's
um,
what my kids would be saying right now.
because I wanted everybody takes the first day of school picture. So I took the 2nd day and the 3rd day, and then you know how it goes, Mark. You get challenged, you can't back down from a challenge, so I had to take it every day, and then I got bored with that, so I started adding the dad joke, and I'll tell you what, just the number of people that are like, "That makes my morning every day." Now
That's
that I'm
awesome.
retired, they come a little bit later in the day, but I used to do it before school because teachers would put them in their slide decks, in their morning slide decks. But yeah, so there's a cool dad joke and, the mug of me out there. So yeah, find me. I love to chat. Reach out. CoachThomasTech.com is my website. My podcast is the Tech Ed Clubhouse. It's on Spotify. Yeah, 85 episodes in. Love to have you both on at some point if you're
Beautiful.
willing and able. And yeah, so we talk about all kinds of good stuff.
That's awesome. Dan, it was such a pleasure. Karen, thank you so much for
Yeah,
answering the
yeah,
call and
yeah.
delivering in the clutch. Really, really, thank you
Thanks for
both
having
so
me. Really,
much.
it was an honor.
No, the pleasure was mine. Thank you both. I really appreciate it.